Right, this may be your first podcast for Algebra 1 that you've heard or you've listened to before, and basically it's a review of some things that you've already had. But when you see the topic here, adding and subtracting fractions review. So for example, if you had 1/2 plus 1/3, now some of you may remember how to do this, and some of you may not. Some of you may know how to use a calculator to find the answer to that, and sometimes that's okay. What you're expected to do, though, on these, at least in Algebra 1 this year, is that you need to be able to show work, not use a calculator to get these answers. Eventually, you'll be able to use calculators on this, and I'll show you how to do that with a calculator if you don't know. But right now, you're expected to be able to do this without a calculator, show work on your assignment, and be able to do these fractions and know how to do them without the use of a calculator. That is what is expected on your tests. You will not be able to use a calculator, so you have to have this down. Now, as we look at example 1, let's look at how you would show your work to do these. Now, you have 1/5 plus 2/5. Now, anytime you have the same denominator, you can think of these as being extremely easy. Because anytime you have the same denominator, all you do is you add or subtract the fractions depending on what the problem is. Here they're adding them. And all you do is, since you have the same denominator, you put your answer over that denominator. You don't add 5 plus 5. You never do that. You write down the common denominator, and then you add the top numbers. Since it's an addition problem, you add those together. And we have 3/5. And this is in lowest terms. Now, let's take a little bit here, and I don't want to take too long on this, but what do we mean by lowest terms? It means that the only number that you can divide the top and bottom by is 1. Notice that I cannot divide both those by 2. I cannot divide both those by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. And generally, in class, when I talk about putting fractions in lowest terms, if you cannot divide the top and bottom number by any of those, then it is in lowest terms, and 3/5 is in lowest terms, since the only number you can divide them both by is 1. Let's take a look at example 2. Now in example 2, notice that the denominators are different, okay? So these are probably going to be a little bit more difficult. Not a lot more difficult though. So don't freak yourself out and say they're going to be extremely hard, because they're not. And you've had these before, and again, this may be you may remember this really well, and I hope you do. Now, when I add or subtract fractions with different denominators, I usually write them vertically. And vertically meaning you write them top to bottom. That's how I like to do them. Now, if you're used to, keeping it, leaving them horizontal like that, that's fine. Now, how do you our goal here is we need to get a common denominator. Because when we get a common denominator, like in example 1, it makes it easy, and we want to make things easy. So, how do you get a common denominator? Well, sometimes you think of a common denominator as being the least common denominator, or the least common multiple, and that's great if you remember how to do that. I'm going to keep this simple. How do I get a common denominator? You just simply multiply the two denominators. Multiply those two bottom numbers together, and you get 15. That's easy, right? Anybody can do that. Now, probably the part that you may need a little refresher on. How do you now get the numerator? The new numerator in each of those? Well, let's see. 3 times what is 15? Well, I know that 3 times 5 is 15, so I got to take the top times 5. And what we've done here is we've created an equivalent fraction. So 1/3 is the same thing as 5/15. Because if you took 5/15 and you reduced it, and you divide them both by 5, you get 1/3. Now I go to the bottom one. What can I multiply 5 by to get 15? Well, I can multiply it by 3, so I have to multiply the top by 3. What you multiply the bottom by, you have to multiply the top number by. So here I multiply them both by 3, here I multiply them both by 5. Now, add our fractions together, put it over our denominator of 15. Let's see, 5 and 3 is 8. Now, is it in lowest terms? Can I divide both these by, and I'm just going to write these out. I'm not going to do this all the time because it takes a little time to do and you probably don't want to listen to it all the time. Can I divide both these numbers by 2? Can I divide them both by 3? Or can I divide them both by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10? No, I cannot. The only number I can divide 8 and 15 by is 1. It's in lowest terms. That is my answer. Okay, let's take a look at example 3. Now, different denominators, right? So I'm going to write it vertically. And our goal is to find a common denominator. Well, how do you find that common denominator? You multiply the two together. Let's see, 13 times 5 gives me 65. That's my common denominator. Now, 13 times what is 65? Well, I know 13 times 5 gave me 65, so it's got to be 13 times 5. So I got to take the top times 5, which is 5. 5 times what is 65? Well, 13. So you multiply the top by 13. Now, since it's an addition problem, you keep the same denominator, the common denominator, add the top numbers. So 13 and 5, what's that give us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 18. Now, you got to check this to see if you can divide them both by 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. Little harder one here. I can divide them both by, and this is where, you can just take a calculator to help you with this, but I expect to see this up here, all right? On a test, I expect to see that. If all you have is an answer or on your assignment, no, it's not going to get you any place. Can you divide them both by 2? No. By 3? No. 4, 5? No. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or no. Looks like it's in lowest terms. All right, example 4. Finally, we've got a subtraction one. All right, so I line it up vertically. I'm going to go through this one a little faster so you don't get real bored, even though you might have been bored already. But let's see, 7 times 5, so I take the top times 5 is 20. 5 times 7, so 2 times 7. Okay, everything looks good so far. Now subtract this time. 20 minus 14 is 6. And I divide them both by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. No, I cannot. It's in lowest terms. We're good to go. All right, example 5. What makes this one a little different than the previous examples? Well, I've got 3 fractions. Number of ways you could do this. You could find a common denominator for all of them. Okay, and do it that way. So in other words, I could take my 3/5, my 1/8 and 1/8. In fact, there's a number of ways I can do these. And here's one way. I'm going to do it the easy way. I notice that I have a common denominator here. So what's 1/8 and 1/8? Well, that's 2/8. And you could think of that as 1/4 if you wanted to. So you could take 3/5 plus 1/4 and do your deal there. Or you could take 3/5 plus the 2/8, before you reduced it, and, to go through your deal there. Okay, let's do, I'm just going to quickly go through both of these here, just to show you that we're going to get the same answer. All right, so multiply 5 and 4, let's see, 5 times 4, 3 times 4 is 12, 4 times 5, 1 times 5. What do we get over 20 here? We get 317. Okay, let's see what we get over here. Now here, 5 times 8 is 40. So 5 times 8, okay, 3 times 8 is 24. 8 times 5, 2 times 5 is 10. What do I get over 40 there? I get 34 over 40, but I can divide them both by 2, right? 17 over 20, and we get the same answer as what we had. Now, what I was saying before, you could take 3/5 plus 1/8, add those together, find a common denominator, take that answer, and then add 1/8 to that answer. And do it that way, just add in order. Okay, example 6, a little different. You've got what we call mixed numbers. So in other words, you got a whole number in front of the fraction. Well, really not a lot is different here. So, you find your common denominator for the 2 and the 5. So what's the common denominator for 2 and 5? 2 times 5 is 10, isn't it? So let's see, 2 Now I'm going to change the color here. Let's see, 2 times 5 is 10, so I got to take the top times 5. I get 5. 5 times 2, take 1 times 2, and we're ready to go. Add your whole numbers. Common denominator is 10. 5 and 2 is 7, right? 5 and 7 tenths. 7 tenths is in lowest terms. Now, something I want to point out, pretty important thing. For the sake of example, suppose I got something like 5 and 13 tenths. So in other words, what do we have here? We have what's called an improper fraction. An improper fraction means the top number is bigger than the bottom number. So what we have to do is we got to change that to a mixed number. And how do you change an improper to a mixed number? You take the top divided by the bottom. 10 goes into 13 once. Subtract. So what is 13 tenths? It's 1 and 3 tenths. Now add the 5 and the 1. Answer in this particular example would be 6 and 3 tenths. You might want to ask in class for me to go over that a little bit more, changing an improper fraction to a mixed number. Last example, example 7, so that we don't make this video too long. You're going to combine this a little bit. All right, let's see. The distance from D to F is 42 1/7. So in other words, from D all the way to F is 42 1/7. Let's say that's 42 1/7 miles. Okay, E to F, from E all the way to F is 24 2/11 miles. All right. Now they want us to find out how far it is from D to E. They want us to find this right here. And I'll put that in a little different type of a shaded area. Now how would I find that distance? Well, I take this whole distance and take away this distance, right? If I take this whole distance and subtract this distance, what's left over? This distance. So this is a subtraction problem. So what I want to do, I'm going to use a different screen here, is I want to take 42 1/7, and I want to subtract 24 2/11. 24 2/11. Now, let's find our common denominator. Let's transfer over our whole numbers. Let's see, 7 times 11. Remember, to find a common denominator, you multiply them. 7 times 11 is 77. Let's see, 7 times 11, so take 1 times 11. 11 times 7, 2 times 7. Now we're subtracting, right? Don't forget that. So let's see here. Watch what happens now. Now this is borrowing now. I cannot take 14 away from only 11, and I can't switch those around and take 11 away from 14. It's always the top minus the bottom. I cannot take 14. I can't, if you need $14 and somebody only has 11, you're not going to be able to get enough money, are you? So you borrow, you always borrow 1 from the whole number, and then you simply add these two together. 77 and 11, let's see, 77 and 10 is 87, 88. So replace the top with 88. So we borrowed 1, and then we added the 77 and 11 to get the new top number. Now you can subtract the 88 minus 14, which would be 78, 74. Now subtract your whole numbers. What do we get there? 17. So 17 and 74, 77ths, and the fraction part of it is in lowest terms. Topic today, may have remembered it, may have not. Simply is adding and subtracting fractions.